All right, so it's been the holidays. It's been a couple of weeks since we've coached. What feels like a very helpful topic to explore today in our session?
I need to make progress. I want to make progress. And I haven't been working on this project, even though I've had time.
What's important about this project for you?
So, what's important about the project, I would say, is I want it to be good. I don't want it just to be some throwaway. Anyone who decides to attend, I want them to leave feeling they saw a professional, someone who's good at his craft. It could be purely entertaining, but I want it to be, it feels like too big of a word, but I want it to be profound. I want them to know or to feel that there were layers, that it just isn't a series of jokes.
So you're working on this one-man show. You want people who attend it to feel like, I saw a professional. He cares about his craft. I wasn't just entertained on kind of a base level, but there was something profound that, well, what's different about seeing something that's profound?
It should feel somewhat universal. So even if you haven't had my particular experience, and whatever your identity is, if ours don't match, that you can still relate to it, that you can see yourself in it.
So when you think about where you are now and where you want to be, what feels like the piece you want to figure out in this session?
I never really use this word for myself, but I had seen something you posted about imposter syndrome. And I do think there's an element of that, of who am I to take on such a lofty goal?
What feels like the obstacle internally or emotionally that does show up the most?
So one of the obstacles is because I want it to be good, I just don't even start, because then I don't have to find out whether or not it would be.
What you're realizing is, I don't want this to just be some entertaining fluff performance piece. I want it to be profound, universal, touch people. I want it to be good. And there's a fear about, well, what happens if I realize it's not good? It can't be good. It doesn't start off instantly good. How does that inform what might be helpful to zero in on for this session?
Well, as you were saying that, my first thought was, I already know what the solution is. If it doesn't start off good, you edit. And by profession, I'm an editor. So I 100% believe in the importance of editing. Even though when it comes to one's own work, it's always harder to, well, I feel for most of us, it's harder to see and appreciate the role of editing. I know what I should do next, and for whatever reason, on my own, I just don't seem, I'm going to phrase it like the voice in my head was phrasing it. I don't feel like I'm capable of doing these next steps on my own, and that makes me feel stupid.
Well, yeah, in our session so far, I'm hearing you reunite with a lot of wisdom that you've gained, a lot of strategies and solutions you've adopted, and then you mentioning a shame that comes up when you feel detached from that wisdom or those strategies.
There was a movie, I can't remember the name of it, but the person had tried to quit smoking, and their technique to quitting smoking was, whenever they wanted a cigarette, was to snap a rubber band on the wrist so that it would hurt. And the reason why that popped into my head was I was thinking I almost need like a rubber band that I can snap on my wrist to remind myself that I do know the techniques to use or the steps to take. And it was the phrasing you had of was accurate, I think, of how I often feel detached from the knowledge I gained.
It's kind of like the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs, like how when I'm in my normal life and it's maybe time to write, how do I find those breadcrumbs back to my wisdom, back to my solutions that I've gathered, back to the daylight instead of the darkness of the witch's forest?
Right.
How valuable does that sound for the session goal? What can be my rubber band snap or my Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs to lead me back to what I know? It's not new things I need to learn. It's not new skills I need to steal from someone else. I have these things. How do I get back to them?
Mm-hmm. So a tricky part for me is to realize that I'm spinning in those negative thoughts, emotions, and so on, of how do I get myself to recognize that I'm doing that? Because that does feel like the first step.
So I'm hearing kind of a two-part goal for the session. How do I catch myself that I'm in this dark dream of a forest? And then what are my breadcrumbs to get me back home? Well, where are you typically when you're in the dark forest? Where literally do you tend to be when you're metaphorically in the dark forest?
Alone in my bedroom, which is where I do my writing.
So you're alone. And what about being alone makes the trees of the dark forest grow in on you, do you think?
So my work day is spent somewhere else. And then when I come home, that's when I can do whatever I want, turning on the TV and just completely turning off my mind, kind of numbing it that way, letting that decompression from the workday extend into the whole night, as opposed to, so see, this is where I'm finding my breadcrumbs already, because I am by myself. So it's missing that easy opportunity to just say, oh, I'm stuck on this point, or I can't even begin. And so before I forget everything, I'm just going to make 2 notes, because the first thought was time limit on decompressing, we'll call it. In my head, I've kind of skipped ahead to create a new breadcrumb there, which is, I do have good friends who I can always reach out to, but specifically I have one who is a writer. I can even more specifically state I've created a goal for the next few weeks, and I think it would be helpful if I reach out to you. What I want is to share some excitement about what I'm doing, and have someone join in that excitement. Anyway, that is to say, I feel like there is another breadcrumb here that I can create. Whereas if I don't, I just continue wandering. And as I said before, the fears and the worries just keep getting bigger and expanding and become new things. So what I like about this one breadcrumb of reaching out to my friend is it creates a moment where I can rein all those things back in. And so I can let her know what I need up front and ask how that might look on her end too. Because again, the important thing for me is not to overburden anyone. But if I don't even tell people what it is I'm looking for, it makes it that much harder for them to help me. But I think for me, there's a romantic notion of, I think some people picture writers as, sitting in their little study turret, locked away from everyone else. And that's what it is, which is true. I think that happens. But I also picture writers when they get together with all their friends, whether they're creative types or not, they are exuberant in who they are and their passions and desires, and you're sharing with each other. And I don't feel like I have that. And that leads to another breadcrumb. So the different things that I kind of learned over the years now, I don't know which way would be better. Last thing at the night, first thing in the morning, probably last thing at the night, is just simply write down. It can just be one thing that I want to accomplish that next day. And that is something that I've tried before. It kind of comes and goes as far as a behavior. But what I like about that is there's a deliberate quality to it. If you do it the day before for your next day, I don't have to start overwhelmed first thing in the morning going, oh my gosh, what am I going to accomplish today? I already have told myself different things I want to accomplish.
So if we look at that, the first part of the session goal, how do I notice when I'm in the dark shadows of the forest? When you think about this forest, when you're in it, what does the voice of the forest sound like?
I don't know how to explain it, but essentially it's, all these, the trees, the animals, the wind, they mimic back those negative thoughts and feelings that I have, but they do it with a smirk. Because they know they're doing it, whereas I don't.
So what are the words that they often use that you can scan for as a wake-up call that you're in the forest? This isn't where you want to be. You're in the forest because you're hearing these words being whispered by the birds and the wind and the trees.
I'll try to write them down as they pop into my head. I could say them out loud too. Well, I will say them out loud, but there are phrases. You're not good enough. Who are you? You can put almost anything after that. Who are you to think you can do this? Someone else is better.
And what's the common theme amongst all those mantras they smirkishly whisper at you?
But it is a very black and white thinking, in the sense of, if you're not the best, the most qualified, the most talented, so everything else, don't bother, don't try.
So when you think about going back into your normal life outside the session, what will you scan for to help you realize I'm not in the dark forest, or uh-oh, I've wandered back into the dark, smirking, snickering forest?
Mm-hmm. It will be tricky. But to ideas popped into my head, visuals. So the one visual is, all along I've been picturing this dark forest. It's an animated film. So rather than being just all dark, and not black and white, but dark, is I have the power to start adding color around me. So even if all of everything over there and there is still dark around me, I can start coloring that in. I don't have to worry about everything else. So that was one visual that came to mind. And I mentioned the visuals because they do tend to help me when I don't have words to express what I'm thinking or feeling, is to conjure up the image. Since I do have a tendency to put myself off to the side, let others take up space, is just a reminder that it's to make room for myself. Because stop rolling my eyes, as new agey as that sounds. But for what that means is I can have those doubts and I can have those fears, but make room for me in there. I'm not going to make them go away necessarily. Fabulously successful people will even tell you that they always worry about the next thing and so on. So it's a little ridiculous of me to think that those things ever go away. And this goes back to my black and white thinking. It's one or the other. And that is, no, the fears can be there, but so can my talent and my skills and my interests and so on. So just kind of make room in that fear bubble for me.
Mm-hmm. So when you share this idea of and this image of making room for yourself, not just your fears, not just your insecurities, not just a sense of being intimidated, that you want to make room for yourself. What about yourself is it most important to make room for?
You're just me. I don't have to be anything. My mere me-ness is enough to say I get space.
My mere me-ness is enough to say I get space. So how might that declaration be important when you're feeling like, here I am back at step one of this tall staircase that I have to climb towards writing this one-man show?
It shifts it from what I'm about to do has to be good. So rather than that being the metric, to I'm about to do something I enjoy. Because I do actually enjoy when I sit down and write. When I actually do it, I always have fun doing it. I tend to get lost in it. I've learned not to be judgy about it. The same friend who's a writer, I used to tell her, I used to be a dancer. It was not a professional group, but I used to dance on stage. And she always thought it would be interesting when I would say, I'm not very good, but I love doing it. It wasn't a barrier to me going on stage and doing it. I did it because I had fun doing it. So I am able to do it. And I did not attach, I have to be the best, I have to be great, or anything like that. I get to participate in this creative field because I want to. There's no other entry ticket required. I want to do it, so that's good enough for me to be there.
So Patrick, when we look at your goal for today, how do I notice when I'm in the dark shadows of the forest? And what are the breadcrumbs that bring me home to my wisdom? What feels like the key takeaway for you from that exploration?
What I like about what we've done, a takeaway for me from all of this is this is a learning process. So the different tasks are actually geared toward helping me learn this process, learning how to identify that. And that's a good thing. As opposed to feeling like, why don't I just know this? Why can't I just get this right?
So as an owner of wisdom, as a collector and gatherer of wisdom, what new wisdom do you now have?
That I've had it all along, which is true. But also, nothing feels like, oh my gosh, I never knew this before. But it is still kind of gathering everything closer to me. Because again, I tend to keep them over there and forgetting that I possess these skills and talents.
So as the author of your own life, what do you want to commit to this week before our next session?
So the commitments I'm making for this coming week to myself are, I'm going to reach out to my friend to tell her about my plans and kind of express also what it is that I need or I'm looking for in reaching out. That's the first one. The second one is it's a daily task at night to make a list of what I want to accomplish the next day. And it's a non-judgy one, but it is one so that I start the day with momentum as opposed to feeling lost. And then the third one is to, at the end of the day, take some time to reflect. Specifically on the notion of noticing, have I been walking through the dark forest?
So if you honor these commitments, where do you think that will put you on this big staircase of, I'm writing a one-man show and right now that's the first step?
I think it's helpful in all ways, just with the immediate tasks, because part of those will be generated from that daily task list, that inertia that I often have. I'm hoping that by reaching out to my friend, it creates some excitement for me to be working on it.
And what do you want to acknowledge about yourself today from our session?
I do know more than I give myself credit for. I don't have to keep pretending like I'm starting at the beginning each time.
Well, good work today, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I do stumble over momentum. So I think this is another step in the right direction of creating actions that I can take, easy ones, to help kind of create more momentum for me.
Well, good. I will send you your notes and let me know if you need anything this week to be successful with your commitments. And then we will meet again a week from today.
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful.